Good morning, everyone. Mr. Rajiv Yadav, Principal Commissioner of Customs, the organizers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, first of all, Business Board, for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity of interacting with you all. Many familiar faces, many faces I have known for last 2.5 decades, particularly during my association with the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, and many new people, the people who are going to be at the helm of affairs and in the leadership role in the years and decades to come. When I decided to be here and share with you some thoughts, I was wondering what can I share with you which is going to be of some use to you, and what is there that will probably help you emerge as better leaders in the decades to come, in the years to come. Someone mentioned about the tax leaders in 2030. So why 2030? Maybe years beyond that also. And the thought which came to my mind was that in the next 10 to 12 minutes, what I'll share with you is the transformation in the tax function and the tax machinery that I have witnessed in last 42, 43 years that I have been in the tax world. And what are the lessons that you can take from these transformations about how things are going to be in times to come. When I think about it, 3 images come to my mind. First image, when I visited the income tax office for the first time in my life, and that was way back in 1980. So you can imagine most of you were not even born that time, an overwhelming majority. And the transformation which I have seen in these years, how the world in income tax has changed. Second image which came to my mind was the image of my having first brushed with the international taxation, and that was an aircraft leasing transaction more than 30 years ago. That was a time when you had some major aviation market had just opened. The value system we had in entering into international transactions at that time, and how the world has evolved. And third image, which is very critical and which is going to affect all of you, is what was the role of the tax function at that time and what it is today. From considering what is possible, it has come to, should we do it at all? So these are the 3 things which come to my mind, and let me touch upon them one by one. First thing was, when I saw the income tax office for the first time, it was an unbelievable situation. Can you imagine each return being filed subjected to a scrutiny proceeding? And when someone said, we'll have a sample scrutiny, there was a discussion in the press, what nonsense is this? How is it possible? How will you trust people? What do you mean by saying we'll pick up only a few income tax returns for scrutiny? That was considered to be revolutionary thought at that time. And I remember when as Finance Minister Vishwanath Pratap Singh Saab introduced it, there was a huge discussion that it's going to be the end of the tax world now. What will we do in the afternoons? Our afternoons were only going to income tax office and explaining each return, including those salaried return, which never get looked at now. And then, fast forward, come to the life today. Think about the way the records were then kept. Think about the opaque system that we have, which nobody knew about what's happening. And the main job of the taxation department had no idea beyond what they know and what their friendly income tax inspector tells them about happening in the field. To today, when if you really know what kind of information that income tax department has, or for that purpose GST department has about you, probably you may have some sleepless nights. And I think about the offshore bank accounts then, how common it was. I remember the first time I went to Hong Kong, and there used to be only one direct flight from Delhi to Hong Kong, and that was British Airways. So on the aircraft, you could see 20 advertisements in the in-flight magazines about the offshore companies being sold for amounts ranging from $80 to $500. So this was, those were the kind of things. And then today, it's unthinkable. So the world has completely changed. Now, this has changed because of a variety of factors. We'll come to that little later. Second thing which I was wanting to talk to you about was, and aviation leasing transaction, which I had an occasion to be associated with, as at that time I was one of the advisors to Indian Airlines. And don't laugh at this, but it's a reality. The only reason why I got into that transaction was because I was the only man using email, and I'm talking of 1995. Those days, email was as uncommon as you cannot imagine. There used to be Internet Users Club, that kind of an uncommon thing. And Tejpreet Chopra, who later retired as India head of the GE group, was that time a young management trainee in GE Civil Aviation in Stanford. And the linkage, the reason I got into this was that he used to send those drafts on emails, and I was the only person who was using emails. So by default, these drafts would first come to me, then go to Indian Airlines office, and then we got into this business. Now, why I'm thinking about this is, those were the days without the Indo-Irish Treaty. So there was no place in the world where you could have an aircraft rental out of the ambit of the royalties. And what a coincidence if it was, that most of the transactions were routed through Austria. Because Austrian treaty, prior to its revision in 1994, was the only treaty so far as India was concerned, where equipment rental was outside the taxation. And it was happily tolerated. Jet Airways, you have East-West Airways, God knows how many airways. Everything was routed through that Austrian thing. And because I was handling a public sector company, so of course our value system was different. And my mentor, who was previously in Pricewaterhouse and then he retired as Deputy MD in Indian Airlines, Mr. N.C. Ghosh. Ghosh was very ethical about it. He said, no, we want it upfront, so let's go straight. And people would laugh at us. Why are we doing it? Why are we paying 10% or 40% withholdings? You can do without it. Because people were doing it and they were able to get away with this. Now think about what's happening today. How much the time has changed. As a tax director, you can think about these things. And thirdly, if you were to talk to a tax person those days, you would only talk about, shall we be able to succeed with this? You wouldn't talk about, is it worth it or is it desirable or not? Today, you have 1,000 considerations. Today, you have a value system. You think of the ESG. You think of the reputation that the company has. You think about how will it be seen in the press. So these transformations should give you an idea. But why did it happen? It happened, you have seen the impact of the BAPS, and then you see the impact of the OECD Pillar 1 and 2. Then you see what's happening in the treaty world today. You have seen in 2025, we have a new update in the OECD. But OECD update 2025, which is going to be part of OECD 2026 version, MC probably is not as dramatic as you will see in the UN Model Convention. How things have changed, how they are talking about the system which gives more rights to the source jurisdictions, how they talk about the alignment of the economic activity to the taxation, how double taxation is a strict no-no, how there is a greater transparency, entire value system in the treaty developments and changing. Then you have seen the MLIs. And then you also think about how the world has changed because of the internet, because of the AI tools and other things. I don't know how many of you will recall this, but if there was one turning moment in this century when I saw the realization that today secrets can't be a secret and people are going to talk about it in a very different way, that turning point was Obama's famous election speech, in which he referred to Oakland House as either Oakland House is the building in Cayman Island, which has headquarters of 12,000 global corporations. In one of his election speeches, Obama said, and it's a very famous speech, you can see it on the YouTube or in several things, he said, either this building is the biggest scam in the world, either this building is biggest building in the world, or it's biggest tax scam in the world, and people know what's the answer. That was the kind of awareness which started. Then we saw the Starbucks. We saw the Starbucks, how English people revolted against Starbucks. They realized here is a company which is everywhere, which have their outlets everywhere, but they don't pay taxes. Then we saw the repulsion to the tax structures like the one employed by Google, double Irish Dutch sandwich. The kind of public outrage we saw on the Vodafone. I'm not talking about the Vodafone Indian situation. I'm talking about the Vodafone tax liabilities in UK. So these awareness which was caused, it triggered a kind of pressures on the policymakers and taxpayers to be more responsible to the society. A factor which was not seen earlier. People were only seeing this as a cost. Now they get in terms of they see in terms of the contribution also. And these focus from how to save taxes suddenly shifted to how to be a responsible tax citizen. Now, that apart, the fact is that you have huge number of amounts involved so far as taxation is concerned. And people also realize, businesses realize how important it is to ensure that these are honored. We saw about the global reforms and BAPS 2.0, which reshaped the profit taxation. Then we saw Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. In Pillar 2 terms, when we forget about the amount 1 and 2, think of the Pillar 2. There was a time when the economic activity was so much segregated from the taxation that the taxation was being transferred to the jurisdictions where there were no taxes or there were negligible taxes. We saw how Pillar 2 checked it. When they say, no, we have a minimum of 15%, if you don't charge it, somebody else will pay, so you have to end up paying this. Then we see in terms of the treaty updates. And then you look at the technology revolution. I don't know how many of you remember this. Some time back, there was an article in there was a news information in Times of India, and which is a very correct information, about a small claim of improvement to the house property being detected by the AI. Do you know how it was caught? If you just Google it, you will find it. It's a Hyderabad incident. One gentleman bought a house property and he claimed huge expenditure on improving the quality of house property so that he could claim it at the time of capital gains. He came out with a perfect bill, very impressive bill, and he said, look, this is the expenditure I incurred in 2002. Here is my invoice. Please see this. But then, as Mr. Yadav would probably vouch for, today you have forensic labs within the tax department. GST is pioneer in this. They have 2 full-fledged forensic labs. I'm not aware about what's the current status of income tax, but I know of this story. In this case, that bill was put to that scanner on the AI test. And can you imagine the results? The results were, they have used a font which was developed between 2004 to 2005, and it became a default font in Microsoft in 2006. But the trouble is, bill is dated 2002. So imagine the kind of scrutiny which you are being put to. And this transformation is taking place without many of us knowing it. I can imagine that consultant, coming with a perfect plan, giving that bill, impressive bills, everything perfect. But the level of information which is detected. I remember another incident when I saw how, I don't think it would be fair to talk about it. Shortly, I'll tell you the triggers for the exchange of information. The factors which influence exchange of information, those are also alarming. So no secrets are secrets. Today you live in a world where you should be prepared to face the truth. This word is no longer an opaque word. So the role of the tax leaders has completely changed. Technology has changed. We look at the transfer pricing data, machine learning, and then ESG pressures. As I was saying, that there was a time people were not concerned about what is the impact on the society, on the company. Today they are more concerned about how it will be seen by the public. So you can't come with a plan which looks perfect but which can lead you to trouble. Another simple example. If you see one common thread in all GAR cases which are reported in last, let's say, 6 months, you will find that wherever this aggressive posturing was taken about a transaction, they had an unwelcome visitor from the income tax department. And when these visitors came, rather than looking at the 30-page narrative by a brilliant lawyer, they looked at the contemporaneous WhatsApp messages exchanged between the parties and email which went up and down. So you have to think about these factors also. Are we going to be aggressive enough to land the whole organization in trouble? Now, when you think in this light, how the world is going to change, then I think there are 3-4 factors which you have to bear in mind. You have to have an adaptation to this. You have to use the technology to its full, and above all, you have to think about a very strong ethical foundation. In tax function, again, you have to realize that you have to have 3 layers of this resilience: strategic, regional, and technology. When I say strategy, regional, and technology, I think in terms of what would happen at the strategic level at the top. How do you make it in terms of the functional specialization at the mid-level? And finally, how all this has to be based on the technology. But then, as we could see in this short, in brief introduction of 8 to 10 minutes, the world of taxation has changed. It has changed forever. There is one thing which is permanent. And that permanent thing is this direction of change. And the direction of change is it's going to be more transparent. People are going to be much better informed. And it's a world where you have to use your mind, not only in terms of numbers, but as a visionary, as somebody taking a larger call for the organization. You have to make the optimum utilization of law, but you have to be also responsible to the society. Now, think in terms of the organization, the transaction structures also. I'm an obese man. I know what does it mean to be an obese man, what kind of problems you face. Just think about it. Every time you go to a lawyer and ask him, is this a perfect plan? Do I go to a bariatric surgeon and I ask him, sir, what works better, an Ozempic or your surgery? You know the answer. If you know this answer, then you should also understand the other answer. Look for the legal options when all other things are exhausted. Today we are living in a world where APAs, maps, tax certainty measures, your constant involvement is more important. And that's going to be something which is very, 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 very important. I will not take more of your time. Just one incident I'll remember. One of your colleagues who is in the hall now, and I was talking to him, during this this portion of interaction in the course of the jury analysis of the candidates. And I asked him, how do you look at the DAP profit attribution? You don't have to pay anything at all and you can get away with this if you have a DAP. He said, yes, we have, but we have decided to pay the taxes. And there's nothing new. Sometime back in 2021, I was in a panel discussion in FICCI, and one of my co-panelists was a tax head from a company in Bangalore. And those were the days when the concentrics held the field, and the feeling was that concentrics hold the field. Now, because Lithuania and some other countries have become part of the OECD, so the tax withholding rates are now lower to 5%. And he said it from the dais. He said, although concentrics is in our favor, as a company, we have taken a decision not to go by this. Now, that's the kind of approach which is evolving. We see the same thing in the Sky High, for example. How many of you really believe that, someday MLI will not be enforced just because the notifications are not issued? So today, your role is not of a person who is to just communicating that, look, we have a Sky High ruling. Now, it's the end of the road. We will not be getting into it. Your role is of a visionary who is to think beyond it. Not because those rulings are incorrect, those rulings are perfect, these are given by the honorable courts, we humbly bow to this, but because you have larger consideration in mind. And you think as a visionary, you think as a businessman, and you step into the turning point where rules are being rewritten, where values are changing, where judges are putting you to deeper questions. Think, for example, of shell companies. 20 years ago, if you were to ask about shell company, not many judges will ask you, who are the directors, what do they do? But today they have more questions to ask because they are better informed people. And when I come from my home to this place and I talk to my driver about shell company, he also tells me, sir, वही जिसमें ना लालू यादव ने अपनी लड़कियों के लिए farm house purchase किया. That's a level of awareness. So you should be prepared for those questions. You should be prepared for that. World has changed, and when I talk to most of you, I get the message that you have got it loud and clear. And the way I see the people working in tax today, and I gave you one example of the DAP profit attribution, there are 10 others about the concentrics. I see the change, and that's the most welcome part. I'm so happy to be here with you this morning, and to see that this house full of youngsters who have that greater sense of responsibility, who rise to the occasion, going much beyond the letter of the law, take account of the spirit of the law, and they are ready to take the world not as a number cruncher, but as a visionary leader who is going to change the way tax has been looked so far. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all the very best in this function.